Good day everybody. Today we're going to have a look at planning and application. This is an extremely important step. Okay? A architect won't just pitch up to a building site and say, I think we're going to start there and let's try to build with this. No, they plan the application or the building that they're going to build beforehand very, very carefully. The same with somebody that's got to construct a bridge. They're not just going to pitch up on the site and start building and see what they can do and how they manage. Again, a lot of planning. The same in programming. If you just start with a program without doing proper planning, your program might not work. It might not initially work correct. You're going to waste a lot of time fixing errors, getting the program to work. So proper planning, extremely crucial. These are then the steps that we normally take to plan a program. The steps that you are going to use throughout the semester, and also hopefully the steps that you're going to use in development software. So step 1 is writing the problem description. This applies a little bit more towards a programmer that's already in industry. For now, you're learning how to. So you're really going to read the problem description that I give you. One day in industry, somebody's got to go and talk to a user that wants a program. The user will tell them, and then that person, sometimes the business analyst, will set or write a set of descriptions, the problem description then. So for now you need to read the problem description, read it extremely carefully, read it 3 times, make sure you understand it completely before you start with the problem. Next we will need to select the input data. Now, input data is the things the user is going to give your program, the things that you need to use in your program. We're going to work through an example in a little while. Then we need to select the output data. Output data would be the results that your program must provide. So what must your program do in the end? What is the real purpose of the program? Then we're going to design the screen. It's called the user interface. And we can just do that on paper very quickly. Just a rough drawing just to make sure we've got an idea of what we want to do. Step 5 doesn't always happen in that specific sequence. Step 5, 6 and 7 are sometimes a little bit interchangeable. Sometimes I need other variables, things that will come in between the input and the output. So in between calculations, temporary variables, things that I need to calculate in order to get to my output data. Then I'm going to write test data for the program. It's really important to write it at this step. I need to be able to figure out my formulas and have a look at data to see what my results of my program must be. And we're not going to write it after the program. We must write it already before we write the program during planning. Lastly, and this is now where we're really going to touch on programming, the steps for my actions that's got to take place. So we're writing Windows applications for now, and my buttons provide the interaction to the user. So the buttons will be the things that the user click on to do something in the program. So I need to write the steps for my buttons. I'm going to write it in plain English. I just need the steps to know what the program must do, and I need it in the right order. Computers will follow your instructions to the letter. But if your instructions are wrong, the whole computer program will be a mess. To do step 7, I've got a hack for you. Now, you guys know hacks and you work well with hacks. In programming, these are called algorithms. So these would be the normal steps that we're going to take for every button. I will normally declare the variables, then get the input, then do some processing, some calculations, and then display output. These are the steps that every beginner program will have. Just the basic things. We're going to see in a little while how to adapt these hacks or this algorithm to a real problem. Okay, so those 7 steps are the steps that we're going to focus on, the things we need to be able to do when planning an application. Let's now go have a look at a real working example. So let's just take that away for a moment. Okay, my problem description reads as follows. And have a look, it really looks a lot like your word sums that you got in school, in primary school actually. This is what we start beginner programmers on. These are basically going to be the type of problem descriptions that you're going to find the whole of the first semester. They're going to get a little bit more complicated. They will need to do a few more things, but we're going to start with these simple exercises. So if we read that, it says, Emma Motlong sells apples to primary school children. The price of her apples differs daily depending on her cost to acquire it. So every morning she needs to go buy fresh apples, and at the market the price might be different daily. So what must the program now do? Get the price per apple on a day, as well as the number of apples that the child wants to buy. Emma wants to make 50 cents profit per apple that she sells. Calculate the sales price and display it. So step 1, read this problem description. Read it carefully. Make sure that you understand and know it completely. Then we've got a planning chart that we're going to fill in. This planning chart will help us with the next few steps that we need to take. So first of all, we need to get the input variables. Input variables is the things the program must give to us. So here they say get the price per apple as well as the number of apples that the child wants to buy. This means those two things are my input. Whenever I choose input, remember in the previous video I said we're never going to use X and Y. We use nice and descriptive names. So I'm going to use something like price per apple. Let's make it price per apple. I can add a description. Let's maybe make that column a little bit. Price per apple. We're going to leave the rest of the table blank for now. The next thing that I need is the number of apples that the child wants to buy. So again a description. Number of apples. And have a look over here. The variable name must be one word. And I'm going to start, and I choose a name that's nice and descriptive. And every second word that I join is capitalized. A variable name may not consist of more than one name. So I join two words to make one name. Not X and Y, nice and descriptive names. Also not price, because later on in the program I want to specify precisely what the price would be. I can also maybe call this variable cost price. Okay, that would be really nice and descriptive. Cost price per apple. That's a little bit better. We can change the names. That's part of planning. Coming up with good names. These would then be the input that my program needs. Two things, the cost price of an apple, as well as the number of apples that the child wants to buy. Next, I need to go and select my output variable names. Let's just correct that. Okay, so what must the output name be? They say there, calculate the sales price and display it. So the result of my program must be the sales price. And that's good enough name for the user. I can say total sales price of all apples. Like that. Okay? Only one thing needed for output right now. Total sales price for all the apples. If I go have a look at the screen design, then I might pick something like this. We're going to have very simple screens right at the start. I've already explained the user interface a little bit. So I'm going to have a label, a description, needs to each entry and output and input block, we can say. So the user must type the cost price per apple and the number of apples, and my program will provide the sales price. The user will type in the cost price in this block and the number of apples in that block, and my program will display the sales price in this last block. For input, we always use text boxes. For output, we're always going to use labels. You're going to learn about those controls as we go along. And for user actions, these three actions that we're going to provide right at the start: calculate, clear, and close. We're going to provide buttons. So buttons for those. And a simple layout like this is really sufficient right at the start. So, we've read the problem description, we selected the input data, selected the output data, we designed the user interface. Now we need to do step 5, 6, and 7. And we're first going to do step 5 and 6, sometimes together. Okay, other or temporary variables. What do I need in order to calculate the sales price? Well, one thing that's given in the problem description is that Emma wants to make a 50-cent profit per apple. Whenever fixed data like that, so she always wants to make 50-cent profit per apple. That's a given. Whenever that is given to us, and let's just not use 50 cents, but we're going to work with a rand value of the profit. Whenever a fixed value is given, use capital letters only. This will mean fixed value to other programmers. Again, we're going to talk a little bit about this at a later stage. Let me just quickly go and change the color over there. I can add a description, the profit per apple. I think I will need to calculate the price of the apples. Maybe it's easier if I first take the price of the apple, add the profit that you want, and then calculate the sales price. So let's call this unit price. The cost and profit together of an apple. Unit price I'm going to use, it's not displayed to the user. So it's not input and it's not output. I'm going to use that as a in-between calculation. So I might add other variables at a later stage, but for now these would be good. Now we need to go and work with the test data. Normally we set up 3 different values. So here I'm just going to use imaginary values. So I'm going to say, let's say my cost price per apple is R1.50 and the user wants to buy 3 apples. Just easy imaginary values. So that means my profit, it would stay 50 always. The capital says this is a fixed value. What would the unit price be of an apple? That would be 2 rand, eh? The cost price, R1.50 plus the profit price, 2 rand. So that would make my sales price in this situation 6 rand. 2 rand an apple, I sell 3 of them, so 6 rand total price for all the apples. Let's go work on a different scenario, and you can take a calculator and work out these, but if we take real easy values for starters, no need really for that. So let's say R2.25 and we want 10 apples. That's my next input data. This will make the unit price R2.75, eh? 2.25 plus the 50 cents gives me 2.75, and if I sell 10 apples it will be 27.50. Okay, again, easy values. Later on we can go to a little bit more complicated values. Let's go for the last option. So let's say I've got R3.10 and only 2 apples per apple. That makes my cost price R3.60, and it's going to make my selling price R7.20. Do you agree with that? Take a calculator, work out quickly, but it's easy enough. 3 and 3 gives me 6, 60 cents, double that, R1.20, so R7.20. Okay, this gives me my test data. So test data, I will calculate that. I'm going to pick input values, none is given to me. Sometimes I might give you input values. I fill in the rest of the data. What would be my temporary variables? What would be my output results? So different values like that. The last step would now be to go and write down the planning for my button. So button, calculate apple price, and in technical terms we call this an event procedure. So we're going to write the English-based steps for what must happen when somebody click on the calculate button. Remember your hack, it would be declare the variables, get the input, do the processing, display the output. I'm going to show you how to adapt this to our current situation. So step 1 would be to declare the variables, and we're going to literally just leave it like that. Just fix the spelling mistake. Declare the variables. When we need to get the input, I'm going to say get the cost per apple and number of apples needed. So here I'm going to say what my program must get. Get the cost per apple and number of apples needed. You are very welcome to also use those words because we've got a description. So I can say get the cost price, but we need to then stick with those specific names that we filled in the previous part of the document. Cost price, number of apples. The description is given for us. Next step would be, what must I calculate? What is the results going to be? So calculate the unit price. And I want us to have the formula as well. So this would be unit price, and have a look, we use now these exact names that appears in the previous document. Equal to the cost price plus the profit. So that's my formula that I'm going to use. You need to say what we're going to do, as well as the step, the specific formula that you're going to use. And in the formula, you use the names that we've selected previously. So step 1 would be to calculate the unit price. Step 2, the processing steps very often might consist of 1 or 2 or 5 or 10 steps, depending on what the program must do. I will need to calculate the sales price, and my formula is sales price is equal to the unit price times, we don't use an X in programming, that's used in mathematics only. The asterisk shows us multiplication in programming. So unit price times the number of apples. Oops, like that. Okay. Calculate the sales price. Sales price is unit price times number of apples. And I am quite happy. All my processing steps are done. If you find over here that you need something that's not listed, you maybe need a step. At this stage you can go and add this to the other variables. Calculate the test data for that. Add your step, add your formulas. Lastly, we need to display the output. So we're going to say display sales price, like that. And now my programming steps are complete. I'm going to look at it, just going to make sure it's in the right order, it's in the right sequence. If I go and get this, the next step would be to calculate the unit price. Did I write the formula correctly? Yes, I did. Don't maybe need to write it in brackets, that might confuse you a little bit. We can also go and add this as an in-between step like that. Then we need to calculate the sales price. So again, my formula is given. And lastly, I am going to add the display the results step. Display sales price. Now when you write your actual computer program, each of these English steps will be converted to a specific programming language. Whatever the language is that you use. Python, Java, VB. Okay? The important part is having these steps in the right order, doing the right things. And this is what we're going to work with and learn about in programming. Okay, so let's recap quickly. Today, extremely important. We're learning about planning a program. First of all, the problem description. While you're first years and beginners, you're going to read the description that we will give you. Then you need to select the input data. We fill that in a table. In the table, we specify the name of the variable. That's a one-word, nice description, as well as a description of the variable. And there might be 1 or 2 or 5 input variables. For starters, I don't think beginners will get more than 3 variables. Then we're going to select the output data. Again, we're going to fill that in on a table. And again, nice variable name together with a description. And again, for beginners, 1, 2 or 3 output variables will be good enough. Then we design the user interface on paper. That's the screen of my program. And normally if you go from the top to the bottom, first the input, then the output, and then leave the buttons, real good. Start with something that's simple, and we're going to keep using that. Later on we'll build upon that. Step 5 and 6 sort of happens at the same time. We need to think and plan a little bit. If we pick input data, what would be my steps in order to get to the output results? And I can already work with the formulas, figure it out in my head. So writing the test data is extremely important at this stage. Helps me to think of step 7 that follows. So I write about 3 sets of test data, all different values. I get, and I take my calculator if I can't do it in my head. I write the results and I fill it in on the table. And then we write the steps of the button. Simple English steps. That's all we need. The steps must tell me exactly what the program would do. Anybody would be able to read it and follow it. And I'm going to give my variable names in the formulas over here. So list all the formulas that I'm going to use together with the what is the purpose of the step. So calculate the unit price is the step and the formula. Then I'm going to calculate the sales price as well as the formula. And then lastly, I'm always going to start before all my formulas with the input that I need to get. And right at the end, I'm going to display the output. Okay. Thank you very much.